Thank you, Joyce. Great session, everyone. And I'm excited now to get into our next session, drilling down a little bit more into the utility perspective. I think, utilities got a lot of, they were in the spotlight a lot over the past couple of months and the past year, even with the pandemic sort of, highlighted as first responders. People are finally understanding that the utilities and their workers really are first responders. And so we're going to talk about that and how we can keep them safe. And so please welcome Fred Bonnewell from CPS Energy. He's their Chief Operating Officer, and Eric Clout from San Antonio Water System. He's the Director of Safety and Environmental Health. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question is, how are some of the ways that your organizations support the community and other area first responders? And Fred, we'll start with you in CPS.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that. This is an ongoing effort. It's, we're in a 24/7, 365 business. So, this kind of thing never takes a break. So we've always got to be working with our partners in the best way possible. So it's about every conversation we have with them. It's about all of the things we do with 911, 811 system, and staying in touch and keeping those conversations active. It's about staying in touch with the fusion center that we have here with the city, as well as our ongoing partnership with local, regional, federal law enforcement agencies as well. The more we know about the current situation and what's going on in our domain and our community at large, the better we can inform our employees in making them aware, so keep them out of harm's way. So, there are other aspects as well. There's the weather, for example. I've been through many hurricanes when I was in Florida, working for a major utility there. And, part of what we always tell our employees, in order for you to be effective in the response to our community, you first have to take care of your house. You first have to take care of your home. If you've got that secured, then you're in a better position to respond as a first responder. But first and foremost, make sure your family is safe. And that was a big challenge in the recent storm with people having busted water pipes. It wasn't just the community, it was our own employees that were losing power and had no water and had busted pipes. So it was a challenge, but we met that head on. And for the most part, our employees were true heroes in that response effort. So it's an ongoing conversation. It's an ongoing awareness and educational campaign that we have to work to solve every day. And the job's never done.
Thank you, Fred. And Eric, what about SAWS?
So I think I would echo most of Fred's commentary. I mean, it really is about staying actively engaged with your not only your agencies, local agencies, federal agencies, but primarily to pass that information on to your employees to make sure that they're completely aware of what they're facing. That way, whatever they do, whenever they are out and about trying to maintain those critical services, they're as safe as they possibly can be. Critical communication is key to a successful service or organization like ourselves. To echo Fred's comments about the recent freeze event, we had employees who lived in not everybody lives within the city limits. We have a lot of folks that live in outlying areas. And so we much like Fred and the CPS organization, we wanted to make sure that the folks we knew we were going to ask to come in and actively stay in took care of their families and their homes first, to try and maintain those services for their folks. That way they didn't have to focus in on that. They could focus in on serving the community in such a critical time. They did outstanding. And they came in and they stayed, for hours on end. We had some folks that were out in the field for very extended periods of time, and they did a phenomenal job of keeping themselves safe and the public safe. We had multiple stories. We actually had folks carry salt with them to help make sure they could safely pass through various driveways and areas. But they were actually actively salting roads when other city crews couldn't get there. And they had neighborhood residents that were able to pass safely as well as a result of those acts. So, as long as we're keeping in touch with our folks and leveraging the local agencies and working closely with the Office of Emergency Management, CPS Energy, that's how we've proven, in my opinion, that's how we've showed continued success.
Yeah, it's great to hear both of you talk about putting the employees first and their own well-being. I know working even just at Z Prime, where we were working from home, and I personally thankfully still had power through most of the storms, but it was still just such a drain mentally to try to get anything done. And we have clients out of state that I think didn't quite understand the whole situation. So even sitting comfortably behind a desk, it took its effect. So I can only imagine what it was like for employees actually at the utility. So yeah, it's great to hear that you were putting their well-being first. So kind of drilling down a little bit more into what you just talked about and preparing the field crews, how do you actually prepare them for these emergency situations so that they can stay safe while they're out there working? Fred, do you want to start?
Sure. So again, it's an ongoing effort. It's part of everyday conversation. The readiness for such an event is all the time. So it's no longer a seasonal readiness activity. It's just ongoing 24/7. We do this through tailboards. We do this through our annual campaigns. We have a stand-up that happens every year where we bring in 300 or 400 of our top leaders. It was a challenge through COVID, but we were able to do that through WebEx and other linked features like what you're showing here. So we had to get really creative because in the past we did those all in one big room somewhere. So I would say is also having the right personal protective equipment. We were able to, just by luck, we were able to get chains on all of our trucks. Our mechanics never even knew how to put on a chain before on a truck. Some have never seen snow, let alone the snow that we had during, the Uri was, just unprecedented. It was a 100-year storm. So it's also having hand warmers. It's having the right coat, the right layered effect. And doing it with our linemen who have to also consider working the primary hot. So in many cases, it's not just the layer, it's the fire retardant nature of clothing that they're wearing as well, and making sure that everything that's on their face is fire retardant. So it's an ongoing active conversation, and it's a little easier to convey some of that if you've gone through some, unfortunate events in the past where you can convey real-time situations that really raise the awareness of the employees. And they tend to be more aware when you're talking about real events, real stories, rather than just giving them orders. If you give everybody an order, they're just going to be looking for the next opportunity on the calendar and not paying much attention. So you've got to personalize the message. And that's real key, I think, particularly during real-time events like that one. You've got to make it personal. You've got to tell them the story of what can happen, what will happen if you're not paying attention in the right way and wearing the right equipment.
Yeah, I think for us, what we try to leverage most, and I think we've proven fairly successful with it, is really leaning on our folks in the front lines and learning from these events. So you can look at past events, and we do a lot of reflection on those to look at what went well for us and what we need maybe adjust. It is ongoing. And to Fred's point, we operate unfortunately, we operate in the emergency space quite a bit. Things happen all the time with our services, and so our folks have become fairly adept at operating in those conditions. I think one of the things we try to stress the most when we know a situation like that is approaching is to slow down, give yourself the opportunity to think, Make sure you're actively engaged in the work that you're doing. That way you're present, because you've got to be present to win this type of work. So I think one thing I'm probably most proud of from the SAWS organization is we do take that opportunity to take a step back and look at what went well for us in whatever environment it was. What went well for us? What did we miss? What do we need to improve upon for the next event? That way we stay almost perpetually ready for these types of scenarios. And I think in any event like this, you've got to approach those lessons learned from a continuous improvement mindset, because you can always be better. I think that both of our organizations, we do a really good job at providing the services we provide. But I think that we also do understand that we can always be better. So I think as long as we approach, our day-to-day work and our folks, really every aspect of our work, with that in mind, I think we're going to continue to be able to provide critical services in a highly reliable fashion.
So let's talk a little bit about innovation. And Eric, maybe you can start on this question. Is it, employing those lessons learned? What is safety innovation for field-based workers and responders really look like? How does that in turn affect customers and the broader community?
Well, I think, a lot of times people, at least my experience, when people hear the term innovation, tends to spark a mental image of some new technology or a new piece of equipment. And honestly, sometimes those things come up, and you've got to explore those avenues and keep your mind open to the potential for some new equipment that will help you do your work safer, more effectively. But the most effective piece, I guess, when I think of innovation, and what we try to stress the most with our organization, is innovation really is thinking differently, approaching the work differently, or at least with an open mind. One of the biggest challenges I think organizations like ours face is breaking our own paradigms. We've got long tenures in our organizations. We've been around for a long time, and so folks come to work for us and they stay working for us, and so they learn things on the job, and those practices and those habits tend to stick, especially when it's effective and it's been working well for the organizations for many years. To ask them to take a step back and think differently, or open their minds up to the potential of doing something differently that could equate to a better way, that can be challenging. I mean, we're all humans, and we tend to lock onto the things that we're most comfortable with. Obviously, we're both highly risk-averse organizations. We are not in the business of taking risk. And so sometimes when we ask for innovative ideas, it can be equated to risk. So we've got to work with our folks and get them comfortable with at least talking through the potential of as we learn these lessons, how can we explore ways of doing things differently to make ourselves better and strengthen the organizations. And that's the way we try to approach it. We've got some really forward-thinking leadership in the organization, and they really promote and encourage innovation. We've actually got a whole team dedicated to continuous improvement and innovation. They're not they're kind of the guides, or the tour guides, so to speak. I mean, they do a lot of really good work with the organization, but they really are guides. The true innovation, the true forward-leaning thought lies with the folks who do the work day in and day out. And so I think we try to stress the importance of that frontline input and feedback to help make them more successful. Because from an organizational perspective, we're really here to support those folks. They're the ones that are making the magic happen. And so if they come to us with new ideas and suggestions, we owe it to them to listen and to explore those opportunities. So I think that's the best way that we've tried to employ it. It seems, I mean, it's working for us so far. Obviously, we're fine-tuning that on a daily basis, but that's kind of how we approach it.
Yeah, that's a good point of innovation not necessarily being some shiny new technology, but maybe just a change in thinking. Fred, how does CPS Energy approach innovation when it comes to safety?
I would say not very dissimilar to what Eric mentioned. I mean, we have a lot of similarities in how we do things. I liked what he said about, breaking the paradigm. It sparks a thought about if you always do what you've always done, then you'll get the same results over and over and over. And I think what we've done over the past 3 years is we started out with Six Sigma projects. And last year we had probably 50-ish, but we got to a point where it's not just about the project, it's about caring for the asset. And the asset is our people, first and foremost. And everything else cascades down from there. So it's with that in mind that we have to set the right thought about foundationally, how do we go about this idea of continuous improvement. So we've done that very similarly. A lot of that's efficiency gains as well as ways to think better. So I would say a lot of this boils down to how the leadership messages the employees. For example, being ready for an emergency means thinking out of the box. Do we have at all of our power plants installed ladders on every floor? Or are we asking them to go all the way down to the bottom every time to get a ladder and go all the way back up? And during a storm like Uri, elevators were frozen. We had a problem. And so we're using the stairways all the time, 12 levels up, 150 feet. So if you're using the elevator all the time and you're used to that, then you're not thinking out of the box. And so it's getting our folks thinking about, look, take the elevator out of the equation, use the stairway, get into that habit. And that actually paid off during the storm. And it's also, technology wise, there's another play with that. It's, our trucks now have telematics for the first time in the history of our company. That's a little bit hard to say because most utilities on the electric and gas side have had telematics for probably 20 years. We installed those last year, unfortunately, as a result of an event where a truck got stolen. And we didn't have eyes on that vehicle for about 24 hours. It showed up, but that's just a small example. And the telematics provides also an avenue to identify where the truck's at all times for safety's sake. Another one is using sensors more, particularly for heat stress. Working in the underground environment in vaults in this kind of weather right now can be very dangerous. So it's utilizing the sensors to give you that immediate feedback, what your body core temperature is, rather than relying on the employee to tell you, and that might be too late.
Yeah, again, I just really like how you highlighted that it's more about, it can be even just common sense things like, making sure you have ladders available, but that's actually considered innovative because you're thinking differently. So yeah, great examples there. So what are some of the current safety concerns for field-based workers? Fred, do you want to take that one first?
One of the more common ones, and it's been something that's in the utility industry for a really long time. We have a lot of lone workers. So when you think about the troubleshooting aspect of what we do, whether it's electrical, gas, they go out on an odor complaint or they go out on an electrical complaint and they're by themselves. So we have to make sure on the electrical side that one person's not working on live wire. They are working in a de-energized environment, first and foremost. And the first thing they encounter something that's the primary is engaged, they have to deactivate. That's their best defense to that situation. We had a big challenge during COVID. We're one of the few utilities on the gas side that opted during COVID to still go in everyone's house on an odor complaint in the middle of COVID. So we had to go to an extraordinary measures to train our employees on how to enter the house, how to engage the customer in that right conversation to keep our continuance of our support to this community. We never wanted to stop that activity. So last year we went into right at 50,000 homes during COVID. That was amazing when you look at most utilities completely shut that down. And only unless they were forced to. So, so we're going to talk of how to bring that home from the lone worker perspective. But the lone worker safety has continued to be an issue, and sensors play a big role in that. If the heart stops and the employee goes down, it sends an alarm to your electrical control center right away, which is manned 24/7, and they know that somebody's in trouble.
Great, thank you.
I think from our side, I mean, we have a lot of folks that work independently as well, a lot of lone workers, but I think most of the hazards we deal with from a day-to-day perspective is we have a lot of environmental hazards, as does Fred and his team. But the space that we work in, most of our infrastructure is underground, so we have to do a lot of work underground in vaults. There's heat, there's insects, there's snakes. I mean, the environmental hazards are prevalent every day. So working with our folks, understanding about how to approach the work safely. We deal, obviously, both organizations deal a lot we're out in the public every day. So you also have, public hazards. We've got traffic hazards because most of our infrastructure is in roadways, crosses roadways, heavily congested areas. So we've got a lot of issues like that. Or we too leverage GPS to understand where our units are and how they're tracking, and it helps us understand driving patterns, driver behavior, but it also helps us identify potential hazards. We've got cameras integrated into our GPS system. So it gives us additional eyes on the ground, so to speak, to help our folks identify potential issues. So I think those are some of the things we've got to focus in. We work in high pressure areas. So we've got, across our service territory, we've got 37 different pressure zones because we have drastic elevation changes from the north side of our territory down to the south side. So you have to, it's almost the equivalent of Fred's folks working in a live line situation. We're working in high pressure areas. So we've got to be in constant communication with our control center. That way they can valve things off or try to isolate those hazards before our folks actively have to work on it. Sometimes in emergency situations, you can't avoid those hazards. You can't cut services off, or you can't, reroute things. But we do have a lot of redundancy built into our system, designed into our system, fortunately, that allows us 9 times out of 10 to isolate those hazards for our folks to help keep them safe and keep the public safe as well, because it doesn't just present a hazard for our folks that are actively working on it. You also are in highly populated residential and commercial areas. You've got to be mindful of all the time.
Yeah, and I think kind of along those lines of, being part of a community and communicating with not just your employees, but the broader community. What about stakeholders and stakeholder communication, especially during an emergency? There's lots of different agencies or organizations that have to work together. So what is that process sort of like? How do you guys approach that stakeholder communication during an emergency? Fred?
Well, it's the way to do that, the way we've done it, and brought it up to where it is now, is it's not treating it as an emergency. It's having that ongoing conversation on a routine basis. So we create that relationship, we create that ongoing dialogue. So if an emergency happens and we don't set that dialogue framework in place, then Eric doesn't even know who I am, and vice versa. And it's also stakeholders about our sister utilities in the city. It's about understanding what the top 5 pumping stations are. In the next Uri that happens, we have to have better coordination on our side and with SAWS to make sure that we're in touch with them. They're in touch with us when we know we have to make a circuit decision. And do we have the right kind of backup generation in place to support them? So the secret sauce is really ongoing dialogue, Aaron. It's not just at the time of an emergency that occurs.
It's hard to offer much more than that. I think Fred nailed it. It's about the relationships that we establish and continue to nurture and grow. Understanding that we are heavily dependent on one another, and we've got other agencies locally that we're heavily dependent upon. There's so much interconnectedness, to serve this community, to make sure that we're effective at what we do. And so I think, that really is the way you have to look at it. You can't treat each one as an independent event. You've got to build those relationships, maintain those relationships. That way, you know how to navigate those more challenging situations. It's not having to figure out who the right folks are that you need to engage with, or the right locations, the right critical assets that have to maintain services. You know that, you've known it, and it's just another day in the life of the utility service provider. Fortunately, I mean, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to make it where it's a kind of normal course of business, maybe just a little bit more elevated from a public perspective. But we deal with critical and challenging work on a daily basis, and so maintaining those relationships really is what's key.
Great, thank you. I do have a couple more questions, but I wanted to remind our audience that if you have any questions for Fred or Eric, you can submit them in the chat. So what about consumers and customers during critical events and emergencies? How can they assist you all? They're the ones needing to be served, but in certain situations, like the winter storm, we were all called upon to sort of help out where we could and conserve where we could. So what are some other ways that consumers or customers can help utilities during these types of situations?
I'll start off. So again, it's about relationships. It's about using our digital framework we now have available to us to market and to communicate with our customers on a constantly basis. But we also know during Storm Uri that sometimes you don't have the power. So you've got to resort to out-of-the-box thinking, whether it's on TV, whether it's on ham radio system, whether it's on phone calls to the home, to make sure on a random call basis everybody's called and they receive the warning, they receive the information they need to know. In the event of a hurricane, for example, which this community is far overdue, you've got to have resources available to protect yourself. You've got to have the ability to cover your windows, to anchor your garage door. That's where the main draft is going to occur. Because if you don't do that, you're going to lose your roof. And when you lose the roof, you lose your house. And the other thing is make sure you've got adequate insurance. Those are protections that the consumer can take for themselves. At the same time, during the summer that we're in now, is messaging our people in the community about thermostat conservation. We know right now today, ERCOT's not tight. But by next week, when it gets up to 99 degrees, it could probably be tight, particularly if the wind's not blowing and we're not able to use wind to aggregate to the grid. So it'll be another tight market time. It's being aware of how they can do those things on their own to be proactive.
I think for us, we're, again, very similar. We leverage our digital framework pretty heavily. We've got obviously Facebook page, Twitter. We stay engaged actively from the social media perspective, but we also put frequent updates out on our website. Not everybody has access, or in various situations they may not have access, but we've got a fully capable call center. We've got hotlines, not only for outage reporting, but also safety concern reporting. So there's multiple ways, and we try to publicize those various channels and the various modalities to contact us and engage us. But I will be honest, we both, our folks are out in the field every day, all day. And so it is not uncommon for the public to engage our folks and our crews directly. We deal a lot in that space. And so, and we're effective of getting that communication from those concerned folks back up into the organization. So yeah, I think that's really there. We try to publicize that you can contact us and make contact, and we'll make sure that it gets to the right channels through any one of those modalities, right? We're trying to enhance the communication tools that we have out there. I know that we're looking at enhancing our website and some of the information that we continue to post. To Fred's point on community education type tools to help them be successful and prepare for events like that, to make sure that they're as ready as they can possibly be, and they're as knowledgeable about those potential situations as they can possibly be. But yeah, we have a lot of ways that the community can contact us, and we do a good job. We've got a really strong community relations team, and they're out in all the districts on a daily basis, communicating with those stakeholders and making sure that they're getting the resources and they have the understanding that they need on how to engage us for critical services and their needs.
Yeah, just another personal experience. I noticed that utilities where I'm actually serviced by Pedernales Electric, and during the storms and even afterwards, since then, I've noticed them sharing information on the Nextdoor neighborhood app, which it's a little bit different than a Facebook or Twitter, but I'm sure that's pretty effective because I think people on there, really paying attention to what's happening directly in their communities. So I thought that was kind of cool to see.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've got a lot of our employees live. Obviously, they're not only employees, but they're also customers. They're also neighbors, and so they're part of the fabric that makes it this community. And so they're helping update and give real-time information via apps just like Nextdoor. So they're helping their area stay aware and educated on what's going on, maybe what the status is, and what they can expect, helping manage those people's expectations and understanding.
All right, my last question for both of you is sort of a broader, more general question about the role that the utility plays, I guess with regards to safety specifically in the community. I think there's a lot of talk about, what role or different roles that utilities play in the community. But when it comes to safety, what would you all say would be the main role that your utility plays?
I think it's a matter of how our people in the community see our image. If they see us as a helpful hand, as the olive branch that's there to extend the services and to help at all times, not just during emergencies, and we're respectful of the fact that we know every move we make can make a big difference in their reflection of that image. And that's what we have to build upon every single day, every week, every month, every year to get better. And that's the best way to build foundational organic support from the community. And then you build up on top of that all the programs that are extensions of who we are, our engagement with stakeholders, our engagement with data, as Eric pointed out. It's a matter of how we manage that data space now more than ever. If we're going to take surveys with our employees, we got to make sure that the sample size is adequate enough where we know we're getting true feedback. So it's about every single conversation. It's about every time we knock on the door. It's about every single thing that we do. Everything counts.
Thank you, Fred. Eric?
Yeah, I think if you think about what it is we do and what we're here for, people want to be able to turn the faucet on and the water flow freely, and they want to be able to flush the toilet and things go away. They don't have to think about, give it a second thought. And so when those two perspectives or two services are interrupted, it has a direct impact on people's people's lifestyle, their well-being, their potential health concerns. And so we've got to stay, acutely focused on what our mission truly is and how we serve the community. And so to Fred's point, I think it's about every touch point where we engage with the community is a learning opportunity for us. Well, it's actually one of two. It's either a teaching or a learning opportunity. More times than not, it's a learning opportunity for us because it helps us identify areas that maybe we were missing or areas that we were aware of but we need to be better at. And so I think that, to Fred's point, we do surveys, community surveys to look at, the community satisfaction with who we are, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. And you've got to be very, very clear about how you gain that insight, because you've got to make sure you're getting adequate representation across all of your service territory, not just one particular area. Because that way, no two areas have the same set of needs. So without that broad understanding and having the drive and the understanding, you've got to engage at that level to truly become, be better and enhance things. I think that's what we do. I think we've done well at. Again, it's no different than our innovation from a safety mindset, safety perspective. We can always be better, but we actively know we're not as good as we want to be right now. So I think that drives every effort that we have to be better. And we're local. San Antonio has an amazing sense of community to it. It's a small, big town. It's always been that way. I think for being the 7th largest city in the nation, we're still holding on to that. And so you've got to understand that we're here to serve. I think we both of our agencies, both of our utilities understand that, and we're very aware of that, and we're very committed to being better and being better stewards of the services and the utilities that we're, fortunate to be a part of. But this community, we understand, is highly dependent upon what we do. Take that lightly, and so every opportunity that we have to engage and learn and get people's perspectives on how we can be better, we take it.
Great, thank you. We are just about out of time, but it's been great talking to both of you. And I know I speak for the Z Prime team and hope probably for most of our communities when we say that we're really appreciative of you guys and your frontline workers. So thanks for taking the time to chat today. Now I'm going to turn things over to Jason Rodriguez, Z Prime's CEO, and he's going to have a conversation on innovation. So Jason, take it away.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.